Welcome everybody. Welcome to our webinar today titled Using Strategy to Shape Your Boardroom Conversations. My name's Sean McDonald and I will be your moderator for the next 40 odd minutes. And firstly, thank you for attending today. We always appreciate the effort you make to be here for our live webinar events. And during the session, if you do have any questions, which we hope you will do, please use the Q&A button on your toolbar as against chat so that we can keep a track of these. And we'll be answering as many of these as we have time for throughout the session. And finally, if you stay through till the end, which we hope you will do, and as is customary for our webinars, we have a special treat for you by answering our 1-minute survey at the end of the webinar, and it is only a short survey. You'll go into the draw to win our beautiful gift box worth over $400. Last week's winner was Scott Cherry from New Zealand Rugby, so thanks again, Scott. I believe he's on the call again today. For those of you not too familiar with Board Pro, we are a board software provider, sometimes called a board portal, and we serve around 32,000 users these days across about 29 different countries. And we enable organizations to prepare for and run their board meetings more efficiently and effectively with clever software, of course, our software, with less time and deliver more impact and value for the organization. And as much as we are a board software provider, part of our wider mission at Board Pro here is to make the fundamentals of governance free and easy to implement for all organizations, especially those with resource constraints. So for the next 45 odd minutes, just relax, add to the discussion by asking as many questions as you would like. A full recording of this webinar along with the slide deck and the template, which we'll talk about shortly, will be sent to you tomorrow. These resources will also be available on the webinar page of our website tomorrow morning. So let me now have our wonderful team introduce themselves, starting with you, Lisa.
G'day and kia ora, everyone. I'm Lisa Cook, Managing Director of Get On Board Australia, where I support aspiring and emerging board members to get on board and thrive in the boardroom.
Fantastic. Gordon.
Yeah, kia ora iti whanau. Gordon Shaw. I'm a governance expert with Grounded Governance, based here in New Zealand. Grounded Governance is all about raising the capability of boards and governors, and we do that in a easy, expert and enjoyable manner.
Thank you, sir. And finally, Stephen, over to you.
Hello, everyone, and good morning. I'm coming to you from Koh Samui in Thailand. And I just wanted to thank everyone for being on this session, because particularly this topic today, if you only take one thing away from the topic, it's going to fundamentally change the way your board is able to keep even more focused. I've been CEO of many organizations over my career. I've been the chair of even more and on the board and board subcommittees over that time. But more importantly, over the last 20 years with our consultancy work, we have worked with some of the very best in the world. And I've picked up some good ideas and some good thoughts. And that's really what we're sharing today, things that others have found work exceptionally well. So I look forward to it. Sean.
Thanks, Stephen. Well, it's back to you, sir.
There we go. Okay, so look, the topic of today is how to use strategy to really help your board have the conversations that they need to have. And before we get there, what I wanted to do is just to remind us all what is the role of the board, because to this day, many boards don't really know or can articulate what their role is, and they'll immediately go into, well, our role is to be strategic, our role is risk management, our role is finance, our role is fiduciary duty, if you really want to bore people. But the real issue behind this, well, why have we got the board? What's its job? And really, the best way I've been able to describe this over the years is the role of any board is threefold. It's to make the choices that create the future for the communities that we serve. And so that means that as a board, we have to understand we're not there to make decisions. We're there to make choices. And therefore, the choices have to continually be reviewed to see whether they're still working. And if they're not working, then we can change them And what are the other choices that we've got, even though we're happy with the one that we've got? This then starts to become strategic once the board recognise they're there to make choices. And how long should that choice be for? Well, the only answer that makes sense is for as long as it's working. The next question, of course, becomes how do we know it's working? Well, we monitor it, we measure it, we see if it's having an impact. So making the choices that create the future. Our job as a board is not to make sure the staff are busy. Our job as a board is to make sure that we are actually creating the future with and on behalf of and together with our key stakeholders. So every conversation we have should have that as a filter. What sort of future are we creating when doing this? What are the various futures that are available to us? And in amongst that, we've got various tools. We'll talk about those in a little bit there. So making the choices that create the future for and with the stakeholders that we serve. Who are these stakeholders? How do we know that we're serving them? What impact are we having on them? From whose perspective are we working with and for and on behalf of our key stakeholders? What about those stakeholders that we haven't been able to address yet? Strategic question. So by understanding the role of the board and looking at it from those three components, choice, creating the future, stakeholders, then we can actually have really powerful strategic conversations rather than getting yet another report of all the things that have happened. So the next element then is what is strategy? And again, there's 1,000,001 different definitions out there for strategy, and every single one of them is convinced they're right. Now, mine is not right. It's just pretty cool. And the issue with this is strategy is not the strategic plan. Strategy is not just a piece of paper. Strategy is this mindset that we have both individually and collectively as a board and a senior executive, but also throughout the organisation, of really what is happening out there now and into the future. What, if anything, does it mean to us? And then what, if anything, do we need to do about it? And doing this constantly, every single day. What's happening out there now and into the future? What, if anything, does that mean to us? What, if anything, do we need to do about it? And if you actually do this continuously, then you have what some of us have called adaptive strategy. You've got strategy that changes when strategy needs to change. But at the same time, you're keeping your eye on the big picture of what's happening out there now and into the future. So, Sean, next one. So giving that as a bit of a background there's really three keys to strategy, and therefore three keys to keeping our board really focused on having these conversations that are strategic in nature. The three keys are essentially probably the most powerful tools we've got as a board. The first is our vision. Vision or purpose, doesn't matter what you call it. I saw one organisation not that long ago where they called them the three fundamental pillars of being. It doesn't matter what you call it. It's this big statement that says, here's the difference that we want to make. Not how. That's your mission. Don't worry about the how. That changes from year to year. But here's the difference that we want to make in 20 years, in 30 years, in 40 years. Some people put timeframes around it. I don't particularly think that's useful, because in the end, you may never achieve your vision, but it's non-negotiable. We're always striving for it. So you've got your vision or your purpose statement. The second key strategy is your strategic plan. And usually strategic plans, the ones I've seen, we see thousands of them during the year. Strategic plans are usually not particularly useful because they're a shopping list, a wish list of all the different things that we wish that we could get done in the next 2 or 3 years. A really good strategic plan clearly identifies here are the top 2 or 3 key big chunks of work that we need to get right in the next 2 to 3 years that enables us to move closer to our vision. So that's your planning side of things. And then supporting that, and that is the operational plan then, of course, which then the staff, this is the stuff that we've got to do, which is business as usual. But the really smart organisations then take each of their 3 strategies, 2 or 3 key strategies, and they embed those into each element of the operational plan. So the CEO sits down with their seniors, if you're lucky enough to have enough staff to do that, and say, okay, so how can we, with these programs that we're currently running that are important to us, how can we tweak them so they're further in line with our strategy, so they actually add even more impetus? So vision and purpose, strategic plan, operational plan. These are the key things that we can use to help shape conversations. So Lisa, over to you. Thoughts on what have you found that boards have used that help them keep themselves strategic?
Yeah, definitely. I think a fantastic thing to do is have ways that you can reconnect back to this vision and purpose that you're serving. Whether that's a statement at the top of every board meeting, something that I do on one of my boards is that we have a client come in and share a story about their experience and about how the organization has supported them through that experience, or whatever that purpose is behind that organization. That really does frame us for the entire meeting as to why are we here? What are we doing this for? Because it's really easy to be locked up in a room and not experience that firsthand. So it's really nice to have that back. The other thing I want to emphasize is with strategic plans is to do fewer things and to do them really well.
Gordon, your thoughts?
Yeah, thanks, Steve. It's an interesting one too around the balance between some of the theory. So flying the flag for this side of the Tasman, if we look at the Institute of Directors' 4 pillars of good governance, the first one there is determining purpose, right? So we've already talked about purpose and the vision. And sometimes what I've seen is an example where the chief executive writes the strategy and the board just endorses it. So I think what we're talking about here is the board taking their role quite responsibly, working with the management team, but really focusing on setting that purpose, which then develops the strategic plan. And kind of the model that we use at Grounded Governance, we kind of call it the 5 Ds, which is diagnose, discuss, develop, decide, and deliver. So I mean, we've all got different models that we use, but ultimately it's about having the discussion in a pragmatic way that links first of all to the purpose, because we've seen, well, I've seen recently a number of businesses that don't really know what their purpose is. They've got a purpose statement, but it might not have been revisited for 2 or 3 years. And is it the right fit for the company right now?
Mm-hmm.
Sure. Awesome. Okay, sure. Next one. So I want to spend a little bit of time with us all talking about how do we use our vision or our purpose statement to help shape board conversations, because the whole notion of the vision is here's the difference that we want to make, and so therefore every conversation we have should actually have that at the forefront of it. And as Lisa mentioned before, for heaven's sake, put it on your agenda, not just the board agenda, put it on your staff agenda as well too, to remind us right up front that we're here not to meet, we're here to create this. And a little trick of the trade that we've found very useful in the boards that I've been chair of is to take the 2 or 3 key elements of that vision statement and highlight it in big, bold, italic lettering, so that those 3 key elements absolutely stand out. Because in the end, I don't care if my board or my staff can recite the vision statement. I don't care if they can recite it word perfect. I care immensely that they understand the 2 or 3 key elements and they can articulate it in their own way, in a way that actually helps bring people along with both the story and the journey. So for heaven's sake, put your vision on your agenda. The second thing you do is to actually have the vision statement as the filter for how you're writing reports. So, the most atrociously done reports typically are the financial reports. So, your profit and loss, your balance sheet, your cash flow reporting, typically they're technically correct, but not particularly useful to me as a director, because it's not pulling out of it the implications that these reports should be telling us. Finances isn't about figures. Finances is about what are our measurements through figures telling us that we need to be spending time extrapolating about, talking about, well, if this was to continue on, what would it be like in 2 or 3 years' time? So looking at your profit and loss, for example, what are the reasons for the variance telling us that the market has changed, that things are changing out there? So what are the implications for us about these reasons for variance? Not just the fact that we're $20,000 over or $100,000 over or $50,000 under. I want to both understand the reason why and what are the strategic implications for this if this were to continue. What do we learn from this? What's the wisdom we can get from it? So your board reports are using the vision statement then to say, okay, so if this was to continue, or if this trend was going to change, here is the impact it's going to have on our vision, and here are therefore the things that we need to put in place in advance of needing to, which, by the way, is a fantastic definition of strategy, putting things in place before we need them.
Yes.
So,
Steve, can I jump in about reports?
Of course, Lisa, please go.
The thing I've noticed with board reports that come from internal management or team members or things like that is that a lot of times they don't, it comes across that the person writing the report hasn't preempted what the board would want to know as a result of the information that that person is sharing through their report. And whether that they're just continuing on with a default report template that they were given or inherited from the person who was in that role before them, or they're doing what they think is right. And so there's a real opportunity there for us as the board members to really educate these team members on the type of information that you want and really prompting them to think about that. Answer the so what. So why are you telling me this? So what do I need to do? And I really think that there's an opportunity there for the management team or for these people writing the reports to elevate their game by just being educated a little bit about thinking or the mindset of the board member and what we need and want to know as a result of the information they're sharing.
Gordon, you've seen many hundreds and hundreds of board reports. What makes a really good one stand out from a director's perspective?
Yeah, I think having rules of engagement like Lisa's just talked about is if management team understand what the board as a collective needs. One of my things that I like to have discussions with executives that are reporting is to be upfront around the decision that you're asking the board to make. Because there's many papers where there's loads and loads of information and there might be a recommendation right at the end. But if you know in advance what they're asking you to look at or do or make a decision or endorse or whatever it might be, if that's up front, it then allows you to frame your review and discussion. But there's an interesting question been put in the chat, Steve, from Rajesh about board members dipping into operational issues, and it's that classic one of the difference between governance and management. And in my view, board members should be able to look over the fence and have a little sniff, but not be deep in with their hands. And so some of this can come down to the kind of reporting from a rules-based perspective. What are you expecting? And if the board culture is a little bit too operational, then we end up with boards that are taking operational decisions rather than being focused on what's the purpose, how do you hold the business to account, and are we delivering on our vision and our strategies?
There's two things in there that I think are really powerful if the board decides to take it on. The first one is that if there is a tendency to get into the operational issues, because of course they're interesting and it's what that individual's interested in and so on. One of the greatest questions that I've found as chair that works really well is, okay, so thank you, John, for making that observation. What's the strategic issue behind that for us that's worthy of our time? And that really elevates the conversation. We'll cover some questions later on, but one of the most powerful questions that I found works exceptionally well because it invites people to get back into the strategic mode is, so what's the strategic issue behind that that's important to us as a board? And that invites people to take it to the next level rather than the incident or the activity that they've got in front of them. There could be a bigger issue behind it. The second thing in there is that the way our board reports are written often invite the directors to be operational because they're full of operational stuff and not much wisdom or analysis. So if we actually structure our board reports to help the board think in the way that is going to get the most from them through their diverse points of view and their diverse experiences and skills, if we structure our board reports in a way that helps them actually get to that space, then you keep doing that and then they'll start thinking that way as well too. And the reason I say that is most directors who come onto a board don't really know what they might know intellectually what their role is, but not quite sure what the behavior is that supports that. And really well-constructed board reports can totally change that. So if you have, okay, so here's the issue, here's the implications for our vision, here are the implications for our strategy, here are the key risks, here are the key opportunities that arise from those risks, here are the potential trends that might be, here are the 2 or 3 scenarios that might occur. Now, we think that scenario 1 might be the best one for us, but the other 2 we can make work as well too. They're just fundamentally different. Here's how they're different. Over to you, board. Right? That's the sort of way of thinking that we want to have from our board reports. If your board is acting operationally, I pretty much guarantee it's going to be because the way the reports are written are actually supporting that. So, agenda, reports, discussions. All right. So when we're looking at discussions, again, there's certain things that directors will often do. They'll hone in on the content of the report rather than the implications of the report. They will bring up their pet projects to see if they can get it through this time because they haven't been able to before. But one of the things that we should be doing as directors is actually encouraging both ourselves individually and our fellow directors to have these strategic discussions. And so therefore the report comes in, it's well structured, that's the first start. We remind ourselves of our vision right at the top there. And then we launch into the discussions around, okay, so what are the risks and what are the opportunities around this? What are the big risks that will get in our way or actually support us if we actually understand what these risks are and how we might manage them, and more importantly, how we can leverage them to create further opportunity. So that's something that your Finance, Audit and Risk Committee can support by not just reporting on risk, but reporting on implications of the risks, emerging risks, how we can deal with those risks, how we can leverage them, the opportunities that are arising from them, how do we monitor them. Risks should be exciting, not a compliance issue. And if you're just providing a report that says, here's our risk register, then you are inviting directors to think of risk as a list of things that we don't really need to know about because, you know, someone's got it and we're obviously dealing with it because it's on a risk register. And you're missing out on the flip side of strategy through that.
Steve, there's one good point too to think of the word differently. I've heard recently we talk about risk and risk appetite. But if as board members we start thinking about the drivers for change or the signals for change, it changes the construct just ever so slightly around the thinking. Because as you risk, it's like risk, where's the mitigation, how do we manage it, all those things. But if a board's thinking about, well, what are we seeing out there as a signal for change, what's driving it, and then how does that link back into our strategy again?
Yeah, perfect. I really like that one. The whispers of the future, the signals for change. It changed, like you say, it's reframing it. The other thing
Stephen,
with discussions sorry, who was that?
I have a question in from David Franken. He said, with the focus of our discussion today, why did the Kodak board fail to address the era of digital photography? Why did Blockbuster board fail to address the arrival of streaming services? And why did the Fairfax board fail to address the industry's migration from print to digital? These were all very skilled governance professionals. Any thoughts on the strategies that they failed to acknowledge and or implement?
There's a couple of thoughts in there. There's so much written about all of this and why did they fail? All you've got to do is type that in and it'll give you all sorts of different reasons and so on. My view is that they were both they had market dominance, so therefore they were too big to fail. Guess what? Doesn't work that way. The second thing is often with some of these organisations, they get so much detail about what they're currently doing that they forget to look at emerging issues. And because they had so much sunk costs in so many different things that they already had, that taking that risk and starting to diversify in other areas just wasn't on their agenda. So there's a whole range of different reasons, and you've identified the top 5 in there. There's all sorts of Australian examples, all sorts of examples in New Zealand and around the world. Things like why I might get into trouble with this one. Why is the taxi industry where it is at the moment, where it could see Uber coming in and really didn't do too much about that, is another example. How many of our boards haven't seriously looked at artificial intelligence and what that means for our sector and the people that we're working with, not just as a board, but what does it fundamentally change, and how are we getting ourselves ready for that? And the other element is why don't we try some of these new things as well? If they don't work, oh well, then we'll just keep on with some others. But let's not put all of our eggs in one basket. So, if we're looking at the moment, we're digital in this area, but we haven't really looked at how artificial intelligence is going to have an impact. Let's actually then set up a trial in some of these areas. So, you could spend a lot of time looking at why these things didn't work with those organisations, but often it's too big to fail, and that they had very experienced governance professionals doesn't mean they were particularly good governance professionals, because just because you've been around a long time doesn't mean that you're actually looking towards the future.
It's also,
we have another question.
Add to, sorry, and then we'll jump to Namo's question. They're humans at the end of the day, and humans make mistakes.
Okay. Under Namo's question. What was that?
How can we ensure alignment between the board and executive in terms of board information requirements and integrity of such information?
Okay, so 2 things. One of them is the role of the board committees. So your board subcommittees, they should have that forefront, that the information going up to the board. The finance report should go through the board, the finance board committee, and it should actually meet the needs of the board, but it should be filtered through the finance committee. The operational reports should be filtered through the CEO. The key area here is what some boards have done is that the chair of the board gets the board pack, the board reports, a couple of days prior to when the full board pack goes out to all directors. And the chair should look through those reports, and if they're not up to scratch, send them back. You'll only have to do it a few times and then they'll get the hint. So having the chair actually check to see whether or not this meets the so what question, whether it actually follows the template, and more importantly, has the wisdom and the insights that is worthy of our time as a board. A whole lot of information is never the answer. The distillation of that and the wisdom about leading the discussions in that is really what we're looking for as directors. I mean, every board report should have a heading on it that says strategic implications for board discussion. There's your summary. Here's the stuff that's worthy of the board time. In some instances, the board report should have a heading that says strategic questions for the board to consider. And even if you put the word nil underneath that, at least it gives it a home to remind directors that we're there to ask strategic questions, not just detailed questions. So there's some of the tips of the trade that can actually make a difference. So using a strategic plan to shape board conversations, I still see to this day 70% of board packs do not report against progress against a strategic plan. And the reason for that often is that their strategic plan, again, here are the top 2 things, but there's no timeframes around any of them. Now, the thing that makes a plan is there's only 2 things that make a plan an actual plan. One of them is timeframes, start date and finish date. When should we start focusing on this? And how long should this go for until we know whether or not it's worthwhile doing? So that's your start date and your finish date. And then the last one is, the second one is the outcome measures. Don't tell me how busy you've been, tell me whether or not this is making a difference. Now, how would we know that this is an outcome that we're after? So, is it that the board have approved something because we've got a very talented board and they're not going to approve something that's rubbish? That might be an outcome measure because it's gone through a whole sequence of events to get it to the stage where the board approves it. Or it could be a change in behaviour, or it could be a change in the market, whatever it might be. But the key, what makes a strategic plan a proper plan is the timeframes and the outcome measures. Unfortunately, with many plans, we see the measures are measures of activity. You know, we get at least 100 people along to this. Well, what if those 100 people thought it was rubbish? Now, so what is the outcome that we're after? Well, we want, you know, everyone who comes along to it to actually think this was strategically useful. Well, how are we going to measure that? Probably ask them. Well, what level would you be happy with? Well, we would say that we would probably want about 80% of the people who attended this have actually said it was strategically useful 6 months after they'd attended the event. How are we going to measure that? And this is the sort of iteration where you start looking at outcome measures rather than just measures of activity. Reports against progress. Gordon, what have you seen that really works?
Yeah, thanks, Steve. I think that the interesting thing too is around how KPIs are set and the expectations at board level around how detailed that's going to be. And you talked about it, and so has Lisa, around the sort of deep dives. And what I see a lot of boards is the work program for a board might just be their calendar of meetings, whereas a good work program includes all of these things like strategic planning and when are we slotting those in to the 12-month period, and are we doing little check-ins for an hour, or are they a half day, or are they a full day? So sort of linking it back to the process, but being able to make sure that KPIs are reported on and measured, but then also how detailed a discussion is being had by the board and the chief executive and the management team as well.
Good points. Lisa?
Yeah, obviously I want to see reports against progress every pack that I'm getting. A lot of people use a traffic light system. That's fantastic. Make sure that the traffic light system is very clear on what each color means and what those thresholds are, but also giving us some information about the variances. Why has something not performed as expected or is behind schedule or whatever that is? Don't just tell me it's behind schedule or there's problems. So it's amber and there's problems. Get into that. Do we need to know anything important about that? Is it just something rudimentary and it's all going to adjust itself? Let us know. And what I'd also like to see is our future casting. Are we looking at this progressing as planned going forward, or is there something coming or happening or potentially happening that's going to get in the way of us achieving that thing? And what do we need to do about it now, if anything? So that's
I've seen one board report that was against the strategic plan. I thought was actually very, very good, because here are all the activities, here's how we're going against those, but here are the two that I want the board to focus on. So they actually say right up front, here are the two big emerging issues that we want out of that. The other thing is to recognise that your strategic plan is out of date, the date that it's written. So what we need to be able to do as a board is to minimise how out of date it is. So an annual review of your strategic plan, there's a Board Pro webinar that's specifically around how to conduct an annual review of your strategic plan. Having stakeholders come into the board meeting 2 or 3 times a year and talk to the board about what their 2 top strategic issues are in the next 5 years and what they think the implications for your organisation might be. And then you can then map that against your existing strategic plan to see whether or not your plan's robust enough to deal with that if it's relevant. Staff, I always would have 1 or 2 staff over the year come in and have a conversation with the board about the top 2 strategic issues they see in the next 10 years in their area of responsibility and what they think the implications for this organisation might be in the next 5 years. And that really helps elevate staff's thinking so that they are thinking about the next possible 10 years. What are the trends? What are the emerging issues? Where might things be in 10 years? What might the implications for us be? Not there to complain or say that they're overworked and underpaid. They're there to give insight to their strategic awareness of what could be into the future in some of those areas. The notion of deep dives, as Lisa said, at least once a year have a board meeting that is one topic only, and that's a deep dive into artificial intelligence or a deep dive into cybersecurity and data or whatever it might be, but a deep dive that is facilitated by either one of the staff or one of the directors or an external person on a strategic issue that is worthy of us getting to know deeper. And then lastly, scenario planning. And again, there's some interesting material around about how to use scenario planning, probably the most underutilized tool that boards don't use very often, but it can be very useful. Next one, Sean. So using your board agenda to shape strategic board conversations. Really, the notion of your agenda should be to help focus us as a board and to have those really meaty strategic conversations right up front where we're on top of it, where we're still awake, we're not thinking about, when's this meeting going to end. And the notion behind that is the way you structure your agenda, a consent agenda, where typically you've got 3 types of papers: a paper for noting, a paper for decision, and a paper for discussion. And all those papers that are for noting are put at the end of the agenda. And at the start of the agenda, we approve them because we've all read them and there's no issues that is worthy of discussion. So again, there's a webinar that BoardPro have put on that actually cover this in a lot more detail. And Sean's got an announcement to make in a minute too that talks about how BoardPro have actually integrated this thinking into their agenda template. The sequencing, strategic upfront, the focus, the board reports to support this, and then we need with those board reports, as we said before, where's the so what, where's Wally? Don't make me look for Wally. The big thing's right up front with us there. Mm-hmm. So, Sean, do you want to say just a word about the board agenda? What do you want to do?
Yeah, just a quick one. As Stephen said, we've been working with Stephen now for, it must be 4.5 years now, Steve. And Stephen has built over that time a very well-distributed template. The strategic agenda template's one of the best I've ever seen. And it talks about, your vision up front, having your 4 options for noting, for discussion, for information, and for approval. Those things embedded into the template. So what we have done, as Stephen mentioned, is we've built that into our infrastructure, into the templates of BoardPro themselves. As part of this webinar, you'll actually receive the strategic agenda template in Word format, which you can use, and that's provided from Stephen at Conscious Governance, and it is that document that we have embedded into the architecture of BoardPro. If we've got enough time, I'll show you at the end. Back to you, Steve.
Thanks, Sean. Okay, now the use of questions, again, very, very underutilized, but one of the greatest ways to bring people and the board collectively on track is the use of questions. Now, the role of questions is very simple. It's to unlock the wisdom of both the person asking the question and the person's receiving the question. So a really good question unlocks wisdom. It is not there to seek information. It is to seek awareness and to actually enable us to look at things in maybe different ways that we hadn't otherwise considered. So there are 2 types of questions: those that are there to prove a point and those questions that are there to create. And one of the things I really, really recommend, if you're willing to take this on, is this notion of proving versus creating. Often we know that when we're wanting to prove something, because we can't wait to ask a question to prove that someone else is wrong, or to ask a question to prove that I know more than someone else does, or to ask a question to watch someone squirm, that notion of proving. Now, it's not wrong, it's not particularly useful, but that notion, the energy of proving, you will know. So a little tool. And you can write to me and thank me in 6 months' time if you choose to use this. A little tool: before you open your mouth, ask yourself, am I doing this to prove or am I doing this to create? And if you come up with I'm doing this to prove, then ask yourself, well, if I was to do this to create, what would that look like? And once you've got that energy of the creation, then you just open your mouth and you'd be absolutely dumbfounded with the sort of questions, the quality of questions that come out of your mouth. So this notion of proving versus creating is incredibly powerful. Please use it. When you're writing an email to someone, you're saying, oh, you wait till I get this email. Oh, this is really going to do them in. And you just say to yourself, now, am I doing this to prove or create? Okay, I'm doing it to prove. Okay, so what if I start writing this email from the space of creation? It's a different energy, and you will find that you get greater results if you come from that space of creation. So, common scenarios. This is where you can use questions incredibly powerfully. So, when someone's off track, for example, they start going down a rabbit hole somewhere, one of the great questions can be, okay, so what is the strategic issue behind this that is worthy of our time? Would be one. Another question could be, okay, so we seem to be getting off track here. What do we need to discuss to get us back focused on the key issue? All right, rather than telling them we're off track, now let's get back to it, ask a question about it. Invite others to be part of that. Confused, I love this one. So one of my favorite questions is, you know how sometimes where conversations go round and round and round and round and we're all getting a little bit confused and we're not quite sure the next step. So you ask a question about the question. You say something like, so what question do we need to ask here so that we can reduce the confusion? And then just keep quiet and see what people come up with. Tap into the wisdom of the group. So, operational. Again, you can use questions to help reframe all of these. So we're getting a little bit too much in the detail. What question do we need to ask here to look at the bigger issues that will help to keep us focused? Lisa.
Yes, on the operational, one thing I've realized, kind of similar to what I was saying about the reports, is that if you find that a lot of board members are getting down into the weeds and the operational, it could be because they don't know enough about that level of work, that they need to kind of plug a knowledge gap in order to be more strategic in their thinking and their questioning. So you can't go all the way to strategic if you kind of have this blind spot about what it's like in reality day to day of that part of the business. So one thing that we've implemented on one of my boards is kind of like the deep dive that Steve was talking about, but more so deep diving on a particular area of the business just to bring the whole board up to the same level of knowledge and understanding about what that area of the business does, what it's facing, how it fits in with the strategic plan, so that all the board has that base knowledge, and then we can ask those higher order questions and have those higher level conversations. So if that's something that you're experiencing, and Andrew, I know that you asked a question similar to that in the chat, that might help your board just elevate its questioning and its conversations.
I put some other common scenarios there just to alert us that, hey, we've all been there. We've all been this ourselves at some times. My favorite, the never-ending record player that just keeps coming back to the same issue. And again, the power of the question in any of these common scenarios is to reframe them in a way that you don't have to come up with the answer, but you're just inviting people to move up to the next level. One of the most powerful questions I found is, okay, so what's not working with this? And the question there should be done from a non-judgmental point of view, because the only question that really matters is not that it's not working, but what's not working here and what do we need to do about it? And that's one of the most powerful questions. If the culture of the board is such that if something's not working is not a death sentence. So often you'll find staff don't really want to tell you what's not working because they know they're going to get hit around the head. They know that they're going to be, there's one or two directors on there that'll go straight for the jugular if they hear. We need to change all of that. So what's not working here needs to be a powerful strategic conversation rather than a personal attack. So the strategic agenda template is probably the key to all of this. And what I'd like to do now is to hand over to Sean just to give you a quick preview of a couple of screenshots of what that might look like. Sean.
Thanks, Steve. Yes, we're out of time, but let me just run through just a couple of things. As I said before, this template has been kindly provided to us from Stephen at Conscious Governance. When you log now into Board Pro, you'll see three options. You'll have an ability to clone from another agenda, to use our best practice template, or to now use the strategic agenda template, which has all of the features and functionality of the Word document now embedded into Board Pro. So for noting, you can go to topics, for example, on the left-hand side, and very, very clearly see if you're a director, a CEO, or a chair, the status of that particular topic, and how much time should I invest in that particular area. We also have some fantastic tips that pop up throughout the template itself as you're building it. And it's designed to be fluid. It's designed to be as flexible as you possibly need. You can delete sections, add two sections, but the skeleton of the platform, the skeleton of the template, I should say, is all there for you. So if you're an existing Board Pro client, you'll see that when you go to build your agenda. If you are starting with Board Pro as a trialist, you'll also see that option there. So we're all set up, ready to take you through it if you need help on our chat support. So that brings us to the end. Please feel free to connect with any of the panel today, Stephen, Lisa, and Gordon. Their details are here. I'm sure they will look forward to your connection on LinkedIn. And as I said at the beginning, you'll receive an email from us. It'll be tomorrow morning, which will include the video recording of the webinar, the presentation slides that we've taken you through, and the strategic agenda template in Microsoft Word format. So as I mentioned before, we have a special treat now. Just as you leave the webinar, don't forget to complete our 1-minute survey. Go into the draw for our gift box. We'll announce the winner tomorrow as well. Thanks again, everybody, for your attendance. I hope you enjoyed the session today. Thanks, Lisa, Gordon, and Stephen, for your conversation today. It was excellent. Look forward to seeing you all at our next webinar. Everybody, have a great day.